everybody has a different definition of leadership. And, so I don't know that, in your management classes, if you teach a standard definition of leadership. But leadership to me means, trying to, first of all, understand, what your organization's about, and then and the industry you're participating in, the competitive dynamics, and then trying to work with your senior team to set the correct direction for the organization to succeed and grow and create jobs and hopefully be profitable and have a fair return to the shareholders. Because, again, I think a lot of people are very focused on being very proficient at their specific tasks. And, you can observe people that are always busy, and the real question is, are they doing the right things? And the leader, in my estimation, is the one that can poke their heads above the trees and understand, are we on the right path to success? Because we could be doing a great job of making progress, but if we're on the wrong path and it leads over the cliff, that may not be the greatest definition of leadership. So it really is trying to help steer the organization in the right direction, given all of the competitive dynamics, global macro events, local events, and really do that in a way that brings value to employees, shareholders, and customers.
Yeah. And I would say we probably, I don't want to speak for Trent, but we probably all have that in common, what Ernie just outlined, in terms of vision setting and direction setting for our organizations. That's probably one of the most important things that we do as leaders that I think crosses functional expertise and crosses skill set, if you will. One of the things that I learned actually in a book, and I think it's true, is that great leaders, their most important jobs is setting vision and setting direction. And I would add to that course correcting, to Ernie's point, to make sure that you stay on that path to that vision. And then I think underneath that, there are some real specific leadership differences depending upon what you do. Our organization has 1,000 salespeople across 14 states. So our leadership at a line level is engaged very much in the day-to-day interaction with salespeople and with customers. And there's some different leadership elements of that versus, for example, leading a strategy group or a finance group, smaller numbers, different skill set. But I think those things still apply overall. I think what's important is that you know how to keep track of what Ernie talked about, but also you've really got to dig in your own organization and find out what the unique leadership requirements are for the group of people you manage and what they need to go do.
I'd have to add to that, any company, any size, large or small, leadership is set by, the tone is set by the leader, the tone of the company. You start early, you work late, chances are your employees are going to follow that. And, if you're coming in late and taking off early and playing golf, 2 days a week and long lunches and whatever, that's what your company's going to be. The leader sets the tone of the company. And in all companies, you've got your leader at the top, and then you've got, layers of leadership depending on how big the company. In a company the size of Dex, you probably have 500 managers or something in that company. So, you've got all these managers that are setting the tone, and they're taking on what their manager's tone is, and I think it's real important as leaders to set that tone and walk the talk.
I think that's a great point. I've heard that described as the shadow of the leader. That phenomenon is basically you need to always be aware that people are watching you and taking their cues from you. And I love your comment about you set the tone. I've seen that play itself out day in and day out, and couldn't agree more with that.
And interestingly enough, the customers, you got several parts of your business, but you've got nothing without your customers. Your customers, they can see right through that. They can see what kind of company you are based on, or they can see what kind of leadership you have at your company based on how their personal interaction with your employees, sales reps, et cetera, they can see right through it. And if they feel comfortable with it, they're probably going to hang with you. And if they don't feel comfortable for whatever reason, they're probably going to find another supplier that they feel more comfortable with.
When you think leadership, when some people think leadership, they think all about the positive aspects of leadership and the successes that can be driven and the good feelings that can be derived from good leadership. I think what we don't talk about enough is the pain of good leadership. That good leadership, in some cases, requires getting people into the state of constructive discomfort.
I think that too many people get carried away with, they've got this big title. That means they can come in late and leave early, and they don't have to walk their talk, and they don't have to be available. I had a president that I had to let go, but one of the reasons I let him go was I started getting complaints from his employees saying that John's put a sign on his door and says, he closes his door. He comes in the morning, 9 o'clock, closes his door, puts a sign on the front that says, if you need me, email me. That's what it's for. Well, those kind of leaders those aren't leaders. Somehow they got lucky and got to that job, but they're not leaders. Leaders, roll up their sleeves and they jump in there and they do the work with everybody else. And they're not ashamed to get their hands dirty from time to time.
As I've gotten older, I've not wanted to just fall into the next thing anymore. I wanted to be much more intentional about what I wanted. But as I examined, how I was making some of those decisions, a lot of them were influenced by society. What was advertised. I was told, and I bought into it. I have free will, I think. And I bought into that, needed to drive this kind of car, needed to live in this kind of a house, needed to live in this particular neighborhood, and started to fall into it. And how did that impact me? It started to drive what I became, rather than what I became started to make possible what I wanted or what I actually achieved. And I kind of think that was the cart driving the horse, that what I wanted was driving what I became. And so I started to say, I don't want to act that way. That's not okay with me. That's not how I want to be. I know some of you might consider yourselves in the choir, and that I'm preaching to the choir. Well, to you, I say that the choir is charged with the responsibility of calling out the issues. They're charged with the responsibility of exciting the congregation, with motivating and inspiring. So please, let your voice be heard. To others, I ask, what are you willing to do? Martin Luther King said, most people are thermometers that record or register the temperature of society, of the majority opinion, not thermostats that transform and regulate the temperature of society. Grace endeavors not to be merely a gauge of what is happening today, but confront and then act on what is happening. Grace endeavors to transform. Again, let me be clear. We don't do everything right. We don't have all the right answers. But we are out there trying within the scope of this notion I call compassionate capitalism. How about you? Will you make a career choice to work in a social enterprise such as Grace did? Bring some of your newly acquired skill sets to make an operation such as Grace did that much more efficient and effective in what we do? Will you give at least a year of service to such an institution? Will you volunteer to be on a board? Bring that skill set in that manner. What are you willing to do? What are you willing to try? I hope you give some thought to this. Thank you for your time.